Hi, my name's Helen, and it's really nice to be here today. Thank you, Ryan, for inviting me. And as he said, I think I've been invited here to talk as the editor of Heirless, which is a literary medical journal that I started 2 years ago. And we've published 2 issues so far. But yeah, as he also said, I'm also a medical student in my last year, and so I thought I'd start by just reflecting on that a little bit. So at the moment I'm studying for my long case, which is kind of accumulation of all the past 6 years of my history-taking skills and my examination, and it kind of decides whether I can graduate and become a doctor. And it's made me reflect a bit on the kind of journey that I've taken from being a fourth-year medical student, where for me I had no idea what the right questions were to ask patients. And so history taking really was just sitting down with a patient, opening the floor and inviting them to offer any kind of details they thought might be relevant. And I never ever came up with any correct diagnosis, but I learned a lot about illness experience. And now I'm kind of technically at the most polished clinical self. Next week that will be tested, but I guide the consult completely as I've been taught to do, and I only collect the information that I think that I need, and I miss a lot. Last week, every afternoon I've been sitting down and trying to just talk to as many patients as I can, and I talked to a man who was 40 years old with terminal cancer, and he just broke down and told me how unprepared he was to die. And my first thought was, we've skipped past systems inquiry, which was, it shocked me a little bit, but then I actually allowed myself to respond emotionally to what he was saying, and then I ended up crying with him. It's the emotional connection was something that I realised actually, in hindsight, I really have these days with patients, because I get so good, I've become so good at structuring exactly what it is that I want to find out that we don't really delve into those areas with patients. And it's such a shame, but I think it's actually a really common experience for medical students. Almost all of us invariably transition from being that fourth year with no knowledge about what information is relevant, and then throughout the system in the 6 years that slowly gets refined to a very kind of efficient way of gathering the information we need to make a diagnosis and a management plan, but the patient experience of illness, their expectations, their actual understanding of what is going on in their body is missed for the most part. Because really there's no room in this mental model that we've all been taught for this kind of information. And what textbooks, I think, would show us is that, recognising the humanity in a person is more about having warm hands when you examine them, or something quite practical, or not exposing them too long, or, inviting them to uncover their abdomen, or something kind of tokenistic. And that's kind of where it ends in my kind of the mainstream training that I've had. And I don't think necessarily anyone's at fault here, and I also don't think that it's necessarily always wrong to practice medicine without any kind of wider social concern. And often actually patients do just want to be told what's wrong, what medications they can take to fix it, and not be taken on this existential journey with their lower respiratory tract infection and their doctor. So. But I do think that as doctors we need access at least to a far broader knowledge base. And then also in general there's actually a really strong desire for this among junior doctors who do recognise that kind of loss about that happens throughout the training, and want some kind of antidote, whether it's something that they read when they go home from work, or ideally if it would become more incorporated into practice, they do want an antidote to the kind of tunnelled vision, monotony of daily clinical practice. So this really was what spurred me to start Heirless, which is a yearly publication of creative and non-fiction writing from a variety of people, and it really, I've never quite found a good way to describe the content that it includes succinctly. So I'm just going to not try and do that and just say that it's basically writing about medicine, the broader context and other areas, the social sciences that bridge within medicine, and then also fiction and patient experience. And so at the moment we've had 2 issues, and they're stocked in bookshops around New Zealand and one bookshop in the USA. And they contain writing on a whole variety of topics. So I've got published essays on the grief cycle and its relationship to writing. I've interviewed a Māori psychiatrist and talked about her experience of taking what she calls a community history, which is something that I think is actually quite an interesting practical idea of something that we can add to that structure that I've developed throughout my clinical medicine. An essay about gendered language and the relationship between how we talk about eating disorders in relationship to gender and how that affects patient experiences. And my brother, who's trans, he has contributed to both issues about his experience of experiencing healthcare as a trans person in New Zealand. And contributors have varied from other fellow medical students, law students, an 8-year-old kid, teachers, and doctors. And so there's a few things that I've learned through developing the journal that I thought that I'd share. So the first, and I think it's been a common theme in all the conversations that we've had so far, is just how big the public need is, or the public desire is, for a greater connection between medicine and the arts. And I've had people emailing me from all over, from the US, the Philippines, Europe, Spain, actually all over the world, who are just quite interested in the idea, and for the amount of kind of deliberate marketing and effort I've put out there, which wasn't a lot. The response has been quite strong. So that's really confirmed to me that there's a huge public demand. And I guess, the challenge is how do you actually respond to that, which is what we're all, I guess, talking and asking today. And the second point was that if you're a writer and you've been sick, then you tend to have written about illness, just because it's such a right kind of topic for writing. And so my goal, I guess, is to make Heirless a place where people who write actually want to be published. And although the project has kind of grown naturally just through word of mouth and people being interested in the idea, I think the next challenge, and I think it's a challenge that is I think we all kind of face as well, is how do you actually kind of more formally organise the group of people that are interested in these topics to, I guess, make that movement a bit more obvious in the public realm, and placing a bit more kind of pressure on people that are in charge of the systems to respond in a more holistic and patient-centred way. And the third thing I've noticed and I've learned is that New Zealand is a really good place for starting new ideas and trialling new things, and particularly for a small startup publication. It's been incredibly easy and straightforward and really receptive to start a publication just from scratch without any real knowledge about anything like that. Because I think we are really progressive and supportive in this country. So if there's any place to start up or trial new ways of approaching medical practice, then it's New Zealand, I think. So my hope is that the writing in Heirless can slowly infuse some creativity, broader knowledge base and flexibility into medical practice, even if it's just 1 or 2 doctors who get the journal for Christmas from their parents or from their kids or something. I think it's actually through underrated but slow steps and changing the underlying culture that we can actually make a difference.